In this lesson, we'll talk about masking our objects in ZBrush. So masking will enable us to protect different portions of our model from sculpting, painting, or other actions that we do in ZBrush. So masking actually has its own modifier key. So as we're sculpting, if we hold down the Control key, you can see that it says plus mask near our cursor. And that's telling us that if we were to go ahead and paint, we're going to be actually creating a mask on our object. And you can see this is just sort of a gray color. You can also see up here the mask pen brush is selected. And so now if we go back in and let's say that I'm sculpting and painting with a red color, if I now come up against this mask, you can see it won't let me sculpt or paint onto that masked area. Now if I want to unmask, I can hold down Control and also Alt, and Alt will change it into an unmask. So I can now come back in and take away portions of the mask. Now besides painting the mask onto the actual mesh, I can also hold down Control and drag outside of the mesh and create a box to come in and mask different portions just like that. Okay. If I want to unmask, holding down Alt, I can go ahead and unmask that. When we're creating these boxes too, when we draw this out, if I hold down the space bar, I can actually move it around. So if I want it over here, I can kind of move it over here and mask that out, and I can maybe mask out a portion on the bottom, and then I can come in and add to that mask. So you can really create some complex masks. You can use symmetry to create masks in the same way that you would paint. Anything that you can do with your the paint or sculpting, you can do that with your masking. Now holding down Control, you can also see that there are a number of different kinds of masking brushes. So we have the mask lasso, which will allow us to come in and mask based on kind of a lasso that we're drawing out, kind of like that. So different methods for creating masks that way. Also, you can use the mask curve, so I can mask things that way. Okay. So I'll draw out the curve and then click and drag on the end of it. Get it drawn out here. Oops. If I hold down Control, that would help. And that will allow you to mask out using a curve. Again, holding down Control, you can see you can mask based on a curve here. Alt will enable you to add a kind of a bend to that curve, but you can mask things out that way. And the masks, again, just to find where your detail is actually going to be able to be created, whether it's paint or sculpting or whatever it is, the masking is going to allow you to do that. Okay, you can also come down here in your tool palette. There's a masking subpalette. You can clear the mask, or if you have a mask on here, let me go ahead and choose the mask pen once again. There we go. So if I have a mask created here, I can leave the mask on, but I can turn off View Mask, and that will allow me to still paint, but I can't see the mask. So you can see it's still affecting the sculpting and painting, but I'm not able to see that gray mask. So you can turn that off and on. You can also invert the mask, and you can also, if you hold down Control, and if you click in the canvas, it'll actually invert that as well. So I can say, okay, everything's unmasked except inside here. Now I want to invert that. So now everything's masked off except what's inside here. So now I can come in and start to, add some detail inside here that isn't carried throughout the rest of the model. Okay, I can unmask everything by Control dragging out in the canvas. That'll unmask everything. You can also, you have Control here for mask all. You can clear the mask again. You can also sharpen it. So if I come in here and create a mask, I can sharpen the mask like that, or I can blur the mask out. Okay, I can also do that here. And then there are other methods for masking as well. So you can mask by cavity, which will mask sort of the indented areas, and you have different settings for that. You can mask by color, by the hue. So you can see I've masked everything else, but now I've just masked the red. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually create masks, and they're a really powerful way of just defining where you want to be able to create that detail on your model. Now, if you're working with a primitive, you have an additional method for masking. So if I select a cylinder, I can come into the masking subpalette here and go into mask by alpha. And so I can mask that, but then I can choose, okay, I want it to only be a certain number of rows or a certain number of columns. And that will allow me to, based on the parameterization of this particular primitive, it'll allow me to, come in here and mask this off in different ways. So you can create kind of a checkerboard pattern. Again, this is on primitive shape though. Okay, so there is that as well. Now if you you can come in here and let me make this a poly mesh. If you're using move and hold down control and I'm dragging along this surface, you can use topological masking. So it's actually, think of this as kind of an arm. You can come in and mask off different portions of the arm and then come in and rotate it, and you can see you get this sort of fall off where the masked portion isn't being affected. And you just do that by going into your transpose and then hold down control, and you can drag that out. You can see how that follows along in the direction that you're dragging. Okay, I can control click to kind of blur it out a little bit, and then I can move things around from there just as we would with an arm. So that's good for kind of posing models in different ways. Okay, so control is going to be your modifier key for masking. Just keep in mind you do have different masking brushes that are available to you. It just creates masks in different ways, whatever way works best for the model that you're working on. You also have the masking subpalette, which you're able to modify the mask in different ways with a lot of these different options and actually create masks using a variety of different aspects of your model: the color, the alpha, the ambient occlusion, the cavity, fibers, the smoothness, and so forth. You can see those here. So there's a lot of different ways to create masks, and really the purpose of the masks, again, is to protect different areas so that we're not sculpting or painting on those areas, or if we want to do an action, use some deformation on a particular area, we can unmask those particular areas to do that. So talking about deformation, let's actually go into the next lesson and take a look at using the deformation palette, which we touched on briefly in transforming our models. But here, we'll take a look at some of the things that we can do to deform the polygons and how we can utilize that along with our masks. So we'll go ahead and look at that next.